Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. No matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers. Come on, be in it and join in the fun. Travel all over Australia.
This week in Ask the Leyland Brothers we have an unusual and interesting lineup of stories. Our first story comes from Western Australia. Here, just off the coast, quite near to Perth, we go to Rottnest Island. We have a look not only at the island, but at the unusual animals which live there, the marsupials known as quokkas. And then, in South Australia, we travel to Parafield with our cameras and film what may very well be the transport mechanism of the future, Hovercraft. We see how these machines are built and how they operate.
Then we go to North Queensland to have a look at the longest cableway in the world. Now this cableway was built to service a television transmitter on Mount Bellenden Ker. That's right here in North Queensland. We're going to have a look at the cableway and how the men that work on it maintain this longest cableway in the world.
Well, we're going down the Swan River to an island out to sea known as Rottnest Island. Interesting thing about Rottnest Island, it was named Rottnest by the Dutch explorer Vlaming in 1696 when he came ashore there and saw some very small animals which he thought were rats. They were in fact marsupials known as a quokka, but he thought they were rats and so he named the island Rottnest, which in Dutch of course means rat's nest. And we're going out to Rat's Nest Island in answer to this request, which comes from Mr. Mike Fudge from Blackwood in South Australia. And he writes, on a recent trip to Western Australia we went to Rottnest Island, just a few miles from Fremantle. Over there we saw a small kangaroo, a type of animal called the quokka. We feel this would make an interesting story to show viewers all over Australia. Well, we're about to find out. It's about a 2-hour journey by cruiser from the city of Perth to the island.
The first stage of the voyage takes us down the Swan River to Fremantle. The island has been a popular holidaying spot for many years and now attracts over 170,000 visitors annually. At Fremantle, we're joined by another load of passengers. On the island, there are no cars or taxis available, and the only way of getting about is by cycle. Many bring their own, but plenty of push bikes are available on the island for rental. Many visitors to Rottnest Island make their own way across the 25-kilometre stretch of water from the mainland. For although the island is only small, it is surrounded with plenty of natural harbours and bays with good anchorages. And having arrived on Rottnest, it's easy to become enveloped with the holiday atmosphere of the place. The relaxed, almost tropical feel is easy to take. One of the most prominent buildings is now the hotel, where gathering in the sun for an afternoon drink is almost a ritual with island visitors, and certainly with a few permanent residents. This building was built as the summer residence for the Governor of Western Australia, and earlier the island was a penal settlement for Aboriginal offenders convicted on the mainland. But who cares much for history in these surroundings? are reminders of the earlier use to which the island was put, but the real attraction of Rottnest lies in the warm sun and relaxing style of life here. Dutch explorer de Vlaming, who named the island, wrote, "Here it seems that nature has spared nothing to render this isle delightful above all other islands I did see." And the sentiment is heartily endorsed by most who come to Rottnest. The only way to get around is by bike, but that only adds to the appeal. And wherever you go on Rottnest, every small bay and beach has its share of bikes parked nearby, while the riders enjoy the sun and the warm waters. It's quite some distance around the island's network of roads, but most people like to take the journey, if they can, for some of the most interesting features lie on the far side of the island. Horse riding is also popular, but most prefer to use the bikes if the entire island is what you want to see. It would be impossible to travel the whole network of roads by bike in one day, but most people who come to Rottnest stay for about a week. Even if time is limited, there is one part of the island that is a must for every visitor, and that's that part of the bush where the famous Quokkas, which were responsible for the island acquiring its name, come out of the scrub to greet the people. This cute marsupial is mostly nocturnal and was once very common on the swamps and thickets of the whole southwest coastal region of Western Australia, but is now rare on the mainland and only holds large numbers on Rottnest and one other island off the coast. Here their natural feed has been affected by the various activities of man, mainly through frequent burning of the acacia thickets, and now survives on whatever it can get, usually a very unnutritious diet. This probably accounts for their eagerness to take whatever handouts are going, and will pour out of the bush in large numbers whenever a visitor arrives with a few bread scraps. They've learned to coexist well with man, and have never known him as an enemy. This is probably the biggest attraction of Rottnest Island, and for most visitors, the cute Quokkas hold the fondest memories.
We've received a letter from Mrs. Thelma Day from Ashfield in New South Wales, who asks, "Could you tell me if anyone manufactures hovercraft in Australia? If so, where? And can I see them in use?" Well, the answer is that yes, they are made in Australia, although they're not really hovercraft. Strictly speaking, hovercraft is a brand name, a manufacturer's name of a machine that's made in England. To be more accurate, they're known as air cushion vehicles, and they are made in Australia. And we've come to Parafield, just north of Adelaide in South Australia, to speak with Mr. Bob Taylor, the proprietor of Taylor Craft. Well, Bob, you're responsible for what we see here behind us. Can you tell me a little bit about the way these things work, first of all, and what your own activities have been like?
Yes, certainly. First of all, how they work. Basically, you have a platform, and the platform has around it a skirt. That's the fabric you can see around the bottom of this machine. A fan blows air into the space enclosed by the skirt under the platform. The air pressure under that space rises, forming a cushion of air, and the craft is lifted up to the height of its skirt.
So in effect, it's rising on a bubble of air, and that suspends it above the ground.
Yep.
And then, well, this thrust motor at the back there, I take it, is what pushes it along.
Yes. Power is an interesting point here. There are many misconceptions, but basically you need about twice as much power to push the craft along as you do to lift it.
This small model is intended as a one-man machine, but in practice can carry 2 adults. Bob Taylor has produced this one as a cheap version for people just getting interested in air cushion vehicles, and may be bought from the factory complete or in kit form for the home handyman. It's driven by 2 two-stroke engines. The lift fan produces a maximum pressure under the skirt of 10 pounds per square foot. So if you consider that an average person's footprint is about 180 pounds on roughly 1/3 of a foot, It's easy to see how such vehicles can travel over marshy ground and leave hardly a trace that they were ever there. They're actually floating in the air. There's about 1 finger thickness clearance of airspace under the skirt, and the solid metal body of the machine is hovering high enough to clear solid objects like a house brick. The thrust engine is capable of producing speeds of around 80 kilometres per hour in still conditions. However, wind affects performance, and in average operating conditions it wouldn't reach such speeds. It has no brakes or reverse thrust, so when it's time to stop, the machine is simply spun around and gently dropped into the ground by switching the lift engine off. In the factory at Parafield, Bob Taylor is making several larger machines for more commercial operations. This one will be used as a goods carrying vehicle and could operate in regions where conventional vehicles could not go, let alone carry a load. It's destined for use on a salt lake in Western Australia, where salt mining is taking place. Bob's hopes for a really commercially saleable machine lie in his Sport Air model. Their readily trailable machine is just on the legal limit for towing and can be launched on and off the ramp with greater ease than a speedboat. It costs roughly the same and can attain speeds of up to 120 kilometres per hour, depending on the thrust engines fitted.
Each stick has a throttle on the top. The left-hand stick is the throttle for the thrust engine. The right-hand stick has the throttle for the lift engine on it. The throttles are preset, or rather they're stiff, so they can be preset, so you set the throttle and then you don't have to worry about it winding down on you while you're driving. Once you've started the lift engine, you've got the machine lifted. If you push both sticks forward, at the back end you'll see there are 2 ducted fans, and both fans will be pushing because the gates are open. If I pull one stick back, the gate shuts and reverses the thrust on that side.
In addition to reverse thrust on each fan, the machine is also fitted with rudders for high-speed control. The reverse thrust enables this machine, which can clear obstacles of over 30 centimetres, to be manoeuvred in confined spaces. The hull of the vehicle is boat-shaped to enable it to handle a big wave if it hits one, and also, if it were to be used as a fishing boat, it could be anchored in the conventional manner and will float quite well. This is the largest recreational vehicle made by Taylor Craft and will sell for around $7,000. It too is available in kit form for those who want to build their own. However, Bob points out that there are a lot of man-hours needed to complete construction of a Sport Air model. At the moment, the authorities in most states are not quite sure how to regulate the use of air cushion vehicles, although they can be operated where boats can be used, as long as they're registered and comply with the boating regulations by carrying the same safety equipment. Of course, where they really excel is in this kind of tidal flat, in areas where no other vehicle can satisfactorily go. Already environmentalists are complaining that they will cause damage, but in fact nothing could be further from the truth. When one of these machines has passed over a section of mud flat, there's nothing at all to tell that it's ever been there. As air cushion vehicles become more popular, perhaps more regulations will come into effect, but it seems a pity that a machine like this, which can provide such freedom and safety, should be subject to unnecessary restrictions. Already here in South Australia, Bob Taylor's machine has featured in search and rescue operations for a lost child in the mangrove swamps and could cover more territory in an hour than a whole squad of men on foot could cover in 10 minutes. Perhaps this is the recreational machine of the future, or even the transport of the future.
Very interesting request from Mr. Len Barnes of Bramston Beach in North Queensland. He would like us to show the operation of the cable car that runs up Mount Bellenden Ker, the second highest mountain in Queensland. The cable car is operated by Telecom Australia to service the transmitter towers on top of Mount Bellenden Ker.
The cableway that runs up the rugged rainforest-covered Mount Bellenden Ker is an engineering feat of world acclaim. The cableway is owned and operated by Telecom Australia, for technicians to service the television and radio transmitter towers on top of the mountain. This was the most difficult project in the provision of television services throughout Australia. The cableway maintenance staff are about to go up on a service run. Senior Technical Officer Graham Bennett invited me to go along and film the work. This Austrian-designed cableway is the longest continuous cable in the world, with 5.3 kilometres of track rope. Telecom had considered the possible tourist potential of the cableway, but the extra costs were prohibitive, so the cable car is not open to the general public. The car runs along a track rope which is fixed, and the haul rope runs in a continuous loop up and down the mountain, pulling the car to and fro between the bottom and the top stations. The cable serves a dual purpose. It is used as a communication cable as well. Maintenance crews in the car can telephone the base station to report a fault or for use in emergencies. The haul rope is driven by a large sheave, 2 metres in diameter, known as a bull wheel. This in turn is directly driven by 2 hydraulic motors powered by a pump from a 150 kilowatt electric motor. It costs between $35 and $40 for electricity for each trip up or down the mountain. There are 8 towers needed to support the 5.3 kilometres of cable, with the longest distance between towers 2 and 3, near the top, over 1.2 kilometres apart. We stop at Tower 5 for riggers Bill Hill and Chris Brose to grease the track rope. The rope is oiled every 6 weeks. Travelling at 5 metres per second, it takes about 20 minutes of non-stop running to reach the top.
Is this a long section
the
here?
longest span here, this one, yeah, it's about 1,700 metres long. It's between Tower 2 and Tower 3.
What height are we off the ground?
Around about 600 feet off the ground here where we are.
It's a fair sort of
About right. Need a pair of wings to fly down here. That varies from tower to tower and the heights where we are.
A cableway was constructed in preference to a road because of the difficult terrain in the Bellenden Ker range. As the cableway runs through a national park, tight restrictions were placed on the construction crews. Only one cleared track, 6 metres wide, running in a straight line to the top was permitted. All materials and construction crews were flown in by helicopter. Helicopters were used as mobile cranes. A total of some 2,000 flights were made during the construction, and the work was completed without any major accident. Routine maintenance of the cableway includes periodic renewal of the wheels that guide the haul rope. Keeping the equipment in first-class order ensures the safety of the personnel using the car. Technicians from Cairns make daily trips up to the transmitter. Bill and Chris are experienced riggers. Bill, in fact, worked on the construction of the towers, so this is all in a day's work for them. The weather on Bellenden Ker can vary from sunshine to torrential rain. The cable car can be used in winds up to 80 kilometres per hour. During Cyclone Keith, which hit the area in January 1977, the cable was lifted off the guide wheels and Bill and Chris had to jump from a helicopter onto a tower to make repairs. The top of Bellenden Ker is nearly always shrouded in cloud. A 12-ton counterweight at the top station takes any jerks out of the car as it swings between the towers.
Just, you might get a bump here.
The reason for the cableway is barely visible when we reach the mountain top. Each Friday, part of Bill's job is to check the rain gauge. On top of Mount Bellenden Ker is the wettest recorded place in Australia. Now, Bill, what did we get in the gauge today?
165.
That's millimetres,
Millimetres, yeah. 165.
And what's the average yearly fall here?
Oh, about 380 millimetres.
So
no, inches.
Well, that's about 30 feet. That'll be... Oh, is that tower there?
Yeah, that'll be right there.
Bellenden Ker was chosen for the television transmission tower and radio communication link for aircraft because of its suitability in beaming signals in all directions without obstruction. A problem that has to be overcome is the fast regrowth of the tropical vegetation. If allowed to grow out of control, the rainforest would engulf the cableway in a couple of years. About every 6 months, the regrowth beneath the cable span has to be cut. Occasionally, a particularly fast-growing variety has to be dealt with in this manner. The end of a routine day for the maintenance crew on the Bellenden Ker cableway. We would like to thank Telecom Australia for allowing us to film this story.
Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. Travel all over the countryside, ask the Leyland brothers. Whatever it is that you want to see, ask the Leylands, ask the Leylands. No matter whatever that happens to be, ask the Leyland brothers. Come on, me in it and join in the fun. Travel all over Australia.